Hello everybody, I'm back with another video finally. This is Uncovering the Scripture Geography Part 2. And this is going to be one that should make it a lot easier for you to see what has happened. The Romans spent 23 years just conquering Sicily. Yet we believe they went through 4 emperors, then the following year a local civil war, and then a foreign civil war, all this occurring within 3 years. Both wars with the temple tax as the central issue, and both temples destroyed by fire. Something is drastically wrong with this picture, and we're going to look at it. Okay, the story we got was 2 temples suffering the same fate, both burned in 2 separate wars, both dealing with taxes. Okay, on the night of July 19 in 64 AD, a fire broke out among the shops of the Circus Maximus, Rome's mammoth chariot stadium. This was a city of about 2 million, and there was nothing unusual about fires. The sweltering summer heat kindled these fires around Rome on a regular basis, particularly in the slums that covered much of the city. Knowing this, Nero himself was miles away in the cooler coastal town of Antium. Yet this was no ordinary fire. The flames raged for 6 days before coming under control, and the fire reignited and burned for another 3. When the smoke cleared, 10 of Rome's 14 districts were in ruins. The 800-year-old temple of Jupiter Saturn in Atrium Vesti and the hearth of the Vestal Virgins was gone. 2/3 of Rome had been destroyed. That's what PBS tells us. And note that Jupiter in Latin is Jehovah, which is actually Yahweh in English. That's how it's pronounced. I covered all that in my video on Who's Your Real Father, if you want to go back and watch that one. Okay, then we go fast track to the Siege of Jerusalem and what Wiki has to say about it. The siege lasted for about 5 months. It ended in 70 CE or AD on the Tishrei Babe with the burning and destruction of the Second Temple. The Romans then entered and sacked the lower city. The Arch of Titus, celebrating the Roman sack of Jerusalem and the Temple, still stands in Rome. The conquest of the city was complete approximately 8 September 70 AD. Josephus places the siege in the year of Vespasian, which corresponds to 70 of the Common Era. And that's the 2 accounts we have been given. But we're going to look a little closer at this. This is a little timeline thing that somebody had put together, and I just copied and pasted it. But it kind of gives an overview of what we're looking at. Like around 14 AD, Tiberius was emperor, and during that time, 14 to 16, there's a campaign in Germany on the Rhine. And then in 19, Germanicus is killed in Antioch. 21 to 22 AD, the Praetorian Guard in Rome is concentrated into a single huge barrack called the Praetoria, and which was engineered by their perfect Sagius to make them a political force. So they made this big Praetoria thing in Rome. Tiberius is hanging out at his Grotto Villa in 26 AD. Near Naples is where that's at. I'm going to show you that. And the emperor rarely went into the capital. He retired to the Capri Islands off of Italy. So he primarily spent most of his time in those islands in Capri and in Superlongo, which is like a cave thing with springs near Naples. Okay, 26 AD, Saginus is arrested and executed. And that's about the same time we lose Jesus to being crucified. Okay, in 37 AD is the death of Tiberius. And then Caligula becomes emperor, and he's emperor from 37 to 41 AD. Okay, and Caligula launches another campaign against Germany and Britain. Okay, in 41 AD, Caligula's wife and his only child are murdered, and then he is murdered, and then Claudius becomes emperor. And at that point, between 43 and 44 AD, Britain is under the Roman rule. And it's kind of important to pay attention to these dates because it kind of shows a pattern of where they're going and what they're doing. Okay, in 54 to 68, Claudius poisons his wife, Agrippa, and Nero becomes emperor. In 62, we have the earthquake in Pompeii and nearby Vesuvius towns. And then in 64, we have the Great Fire in Rome, according to this timeline, and the persecution of the Christians. In 65 AD, there's a conspiracy against Nero, and Piso is exposed and the plotters. Among them is Seneca and his nephew Lucian, and they're executed. Okay, in 67 AD, Nero is in Greece. And then in 68 AD, with revolts going on in Gaul, Spain, and Africa, as well as among the Praetorian Guard in Rome, Nero flees and commits suicide. So we've lost Nero at this point. And then from 68 to 69 AD, we go through 4 emperors: Galba, Otto, Vitellius, and Vespasian. Okay, and on July the 1st of 69 AD, Vespasian is emperor, but almost 6 months pass before he can eliminate the rivals and enter in Rome. So he's still not in Rome. He's still fighting to get Rome back. Okay, and then in 69 to 79 AD, Vespasian is emperor, initiating the Flavian dynasty. In 70 AD, Titus, the elder son of Vespasian, takes Jerusalem and destroys the temple, we're told. Okay, and then in 79 to 81, Titus, in the co-regent since 71, sole ruler after his death of father in 79. Okay, in 79, around August the 24th, there's an eruption of Vesuvius, and it buries Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Strabia. And then we have in 80 AD, the Great Fire in Rome again. And then 81 to 96, Domitian, the younger son of Vespasian, becomes emperor. Well, what is compacted right there is this little thing thrown in there. I want to make sure I look at it correctly. But it's kind of like 70 AD, thrown in the middle of all this chaos, is Vespasian takes Jerusalem and destroys the temple in Israel. But then we're still doing stuff in Italy. There is something majorly wrong with the two timelines. I mean, they just do not mix. Most accounts give us the 4 emperors in 69 AD. And this was the period when the Roman Empire went through the Galba, Otto, Vitellius, and Vespasian. And this is like a very tumultuous time. There was suicides, murders, and then finally Nero On July of 68 AD, the Emperor Nero stood at the villa outside of Rome trying to get the courage to commit suicide. This is how bad it was. He was unable to carry out the deed himself and convinced his secretary to stab him. Previously, he had been declared a public enemy by the Senate, and his tumultuous period of rule was followed by a period of civil war. The first Roman civil war since Mark Antony's death, which was in 30 BC. Following this, during the June of 68 AD and December of 69, then you have this succession of emperors overlapping into 69's accession of Vespasian, who founded the Flavian dynasty. So we went from a Judeo-Claudian dynasty to a Flavian dynasty at that point. Okay, and the social, military, and political upheaval of the period had the empire-wide repercussions, which included an outbreak of revolt in Batavia, which is in Germany. So they had that to deal with. Okay, so now we're being told that in 66, right before all these four emperors and stuff, that the Jews had rebelled against the Roman Empire. And then 4 years later, we're being told that much of Jerusalem's destroyed in the Second Temple. The Arch of Titus is in Rome and built to commemorate Titus's victory in Judah. Okay, depicting a Roman Victoria procession with soldiers carrying the spoils from the temple, including the menorah. According to the inscription on the Colosseum, Emperor Vespasian built the Colosseum with the war spoils, that he got from the war in 79 AD, and probably some of the spoils from the Second Temple. Well, this just doesn't wash when you start looking at the actual facts. I mean, this is too much going on for one country to go way off in the Middle East and have an identical war to the one they're having in their own country within this short span. And it's really curious that the taxes were at the root of both of these wars, the one in Italy and the one we call Israel today. The first Jewish-Roman War, which started in 66, sometimes called the Great Jewish Revolt, with anti-taxation protest and attacks upon the Roman citizens by the Jews. So the actual war, I think, was going on in Rome, not in the Middle East. Nero in 68 AD was followed by a brief period of Roman civil war. And that's right in the middle of all this. Nero had been content to be guided by his mother, Agrippa. His extravagant empire-wide program of public and private works was funded by a rise in taxes, which was what brought all this on. Now, is it a coincidence that the same year Jerusalem fell in 70 AD that the Roman Emperor Vespasian grants Latin rights to all Spanish communities, towns prosper under the new charters? How could Rome have a civil war and a war in Israel involving the same people at the same time? The year of the four emperors in 69 AD was a period of history in the Roman Empire in which four emperors ruled in succession. The suicide of the Emperor Nero in 68 was followed by this brief period. The first Roman civil war since Mark Antony's death in 30 BC. This is different accounts, but they all pretty much say the same thing, over and over and over, that these two events mirror each other, almost identical. This is an article written on the Great Fire of Rome, which erupted in 64, and the fire started the Aventurine overlooking the Circus Maximus. The Fire of Rome. Tacitus, the main ancient source for information about the fire. He is. When I went looking and searching, he and Josephus are about the only two that write about it. He wrote that countless mansions, residencies, and temples were destroyed. Tacitus and Cassiodoro have both written of extensive damage to Palatine. Okay, now this is writing about the Roman war, and we're looking at Palatine. That's because in the middle of Rome was Palatine Hill, and I believe it is the same Palatine that Josephus writes about, but when they write it over there, it becomes Palestine and a whole nother area. The fire is reported to have burned for over a week and destroyed 3 of the 14 Roman districts. This is a different account, so we have a little bit different take on it. Severely damaged 7 more. Tacitus wrote that the ancient accounts described the fire as an accident, while others claim that it was a plot of Nero. Tacitus is the only surviving source which does not blame Nero for starting the fire. He says he is unsure. Now, Pliny the Elder, Suetonius, and Cassiodoro all wrote that Nero was responsible for the fire. These accounts give several reasons for Nero's alleged arson, like Nero's envy of King Priam and a dislike for the city's ancient construction. Suetonius wrote that Nero started the fire because he wanted the space to build his golden house. The golden house of Domus, Aurora, included lush artificial landscapes with a 30-meter tall statue of himself, the Colosso of Nero. The size of the complex has been debated. Tacitus also wrote that Nero accused the Christians of starting the fire to remove suspicion upon himself. According to this account, many Christians were arrested, brutally executed by being thrown to the beast, crucified, or being burned alive. Suetonius and Claudius Dio alleged that Nero sang the Sack of Ilium in a stage costume while the city burned. The popular legend that Nero played the fiddle while Rome burned is at least partially a literary construct of a Flavian propaganda, which looked acquiesced on the abortive Neronian attempt to rewrite the Augustan model of rule. In fact, the first recorded reference bode Ira, the ancestor of most European stringed instruments, was a 9th century by the Persian geographer, and I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry. Ibn, I think, is the first name. According to Tacitus, Nero was in the atrium during the fire. Upon hearing the news of the fire, Nero returned to Rome to organize a relief effort, providing for the removal of bodies and debris, and he paid for it with his own funds. After the fire, Nero opened his palaces to provide shelter for the homeless, arranged for food supplies to be delivered to prevent starvation among the survivors. In the wake of the fire, he made new urban development plans. Houses built after the fire were spaced out, built in brick, and faced by porticos on the wide roads. Nero also built new palace complex known as the Domus Aurelia in the area cleared by the fire. To find necessary funds for the reconstruction, tributes were imposed on the province of the empire. The cost to rebuild Rome was immense, requiring funds the state treasury did not have. Nero devalued the Roman currency. For the first time in the emperor's history, he reduced the weight of the denarius from 84 per Roman pound to 96. So there we have the same coinage we have in the New Testament, the denarius. All this starts coming together when you really look at it real carefully. We have an interesting scenario when you look at the earliest manuscripts. that comes into play when you're reading the historical accounts. We have Roman Emperor Claudius. He reigned from 41 to 54 AD. And he mentions that a Christus was placed, he places him in Rome in 49 AD. Well, that would conflict with what we have, in most of our scriptures, because we have him, already dead and resurrected by that point. But it is plausible when you look at the earliest manuscripts, because there were actually two people named Jesus. In Matthew 27:16 through 17 reads, "At that time they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, 'Who do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?'" Now you have to look at Barabbas really means son of the Father in Arabic. So there were actually two Jesus in front of Pilate. And Suetonius, in the Roman historian, gives the account that there was one Christo who's mentioned, and it's also mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles 18:2. So this is something to consider. Historians have debated whether or not the Roman government distinguished between Christians and Jews prior to the modification of the Ficus Judicaeus in 96 AD also, which was a practicing tax that the Jews paid and the Christians didn't have to pay it. And that happened way past this in 96 AD. So we have a lot of things to look at when you're looking at this scenario. It's not as cut and dried as what we've been told. I hope all this is making sense. It's a lot of information and a lot of research, and I know I'm reading fast, but I got a lot of slides to go through. Then we have things like this. Then you come across when you're studying the Greek in the actual New Testament. This is when there were John 6:10, and Jesus said, "Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000 is what we have in English, okay? And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is the site on the left that Israel says this happened. There's no grass, it's just a bald desert area. Okay, this is the site the Greek is actually telling us on the right that this happened. And nobody in their right mind would believe me until you see this entire video. But this is where I believe, and I don't think it was 5,000. I think it was 1,000 in Pompeii, not 5,000. And I'll show you why here in a second. Okay, when we look at the word that was used, let me get the little pointer on so y'all can see. Right here, this word at the back, Cheoli, that is 1,000, and Pentecost is actually Pompeii. And it means 5 times in English, but it's also the word for Pompeii. Now, if it had been 5,000, if you look at John 4:18, you can see it would have been Pente, not this word here. This was specific for Pompeii in Latin. So I believe they were actually in Pompeii on the grass. And you'll see this in just a minute when you see how much stuff is in Pompeii that they have uncovered that is literally Jewish. It's totally mind-blowing. Now, I'm not going through every little bitty thing on these slides. You know, if you want to pause them and read every line, that's fine, but I'll never get through. It's like 95 slides if I do that. But you can see here it again, it's an Oscan word, which is a Latin word, and it means Pompeii. So I think that was 1,000 in Pompeii that he was talking to. And here I went through, and when you actually throw it into a Greek translator, you get that word instead of 5,000. I wanted to just see what would come up when I put it in there, you know. Okay, now, and if Jesus was Jewish, why does he have a Latin Spanish name? That has always thrown me for a loop, because his literal name is Latin and Spanish, and it's not Middle Eastern name at all, and it was very common in the first century in Spain. Okay, here's another interesting thing. Um, I think I showed this in the last one, but I'm going to review this because this is important. Okay, Vinny the Elder, in his work, the Natural Histories, Book 5, wrote that Greater Judea, or the province of Judea, incorporates Samaria and Idumea, okay, and into an expanded territory. And when you look at the word Idumea, that means Edomite. And Edom, right here, and Rome are the exact same word in Hebrew. So when you say an Edomian, you're actually saying an Edomite or a Roman. And a lot of times this word Syria that he used is actually Syria, not Syria. And this is kind of blurry, but there are several places that are labeled. There's one here and one up here, are both considered Syria or Syria, Italy. So I think a lot of this has to do with changing of languages and mistranslations when it comes down to it. And plus some kind of weird decision to move where everything was. Okay, and we have to ask ourselves, why is the oldest synagogue in Italy and not in Israel? And there's no mistaking that the Ostia Synagogue is an ancient synagogue located in ancient Ostia, the seaport of the Imperial Rome. It's one of the oldest synagogues in the world. Um, and it's the oldest synagogue in Europe and the oldest mainstream Jewish synagogue yet uncovered outside of Israel. Now I'm going to show there's older ones. This is going by what Wikipedia says, but actually Pompeii is older, and there is signs of synagogues even older in Sicily and southern Italy. So this one goes back to the first century. And this synagogue was continued in use until the 5th century. But you can see these things are massive. You can't hide this. There's menorahs on the details of the columns. And this is big proof, not little proof. This is Ostia Synagogue in Italy. This is one of the menorahs. And it shows also like a shofar and some other instruments here, like looks like ritual instruments. And this one is located in the seaport of Imperial Rome. And here is one. This is the actual temple area, and this building dates all the way back to the 1st century. As documented in initial excavation, in successive site studies, modifications were made to the complex over time. The late century, early century marble effigies in Latin and Greek, one by Medius Faustius, for the emperor's well-being, commemorated the donation of the Ark for the Sacred Law. So they had the Ark for the Sacred Law. Now, what does that tell you? Dr. Marian Farini, I can't pronounce her last name, Squacapio, I think, the archaeological superintendent of Ostia, in charge of the original synagogue excavation, believes that this commemorative stone, which was found face down, was used to repair the floor of the inner part of the synagogue. So they're saying it was just placed there to repair the floor. I don't buy it. The ruins of the late ancient synagogue complex include four-stepped podium supporting a small tabernacle in the form of an auspicious niche in the columns, situated in the main hall near the entrance, and it was meant to hold the Torah Ark. So this thing was meant to hold a Torah Ark. The columns were two sections of architrave, which extended from the back wall, probably supported by the pediment bridging, and the front of the, I wish my pronunciation was better, attica, featured the decorations of the synagogue carved in relief on the interior short ends of the archive in low relief. Okay, this wasn't discovered until the early 1960s. And they're probably freaking out that all this stuff is becoming uncovered because it's telling the truth. It's like the prophets say the stones will cry out from the wall. Well, in this video, they do. I'm not going to read this last paragraph. If y'all want to read it, you're welcome to. Okay, this is actually what is on the Ostia Synagogue. For the health of the emperor, Medius Faustus, with his household, constructed the synagogue and built and produced from his own gifts, and he dedicated the Ark for the sacred law. So, why has no scholar said that the Ark was dedicated by the emperors as the sacred law for Italy, by the emperor? Doesn't make sense, does it? And this was in 50 AD. Here's another picture of the Ostia. Does this look like a perfect place for somebody to read scriptures to a crowd? It does to me. Here's some more. This is from the Villa Torlinia, the Jewish catacombs in Rome. These are ancient, and these have been sealed for years and years and years, and nobody allowed to go down there. But you can see all the Jewish icon stuff up there, and the little place for the ark, like a part of a temple in the middle. I even got the eye and the triangle at the top here. Here's another interior. This is one of the chambers, and you can see the menorahs on the wall. It's very interesting. Here's another one that's real old. This one is actually 2,000 years old. This is the Vigna Radali in Italy, and these were some of the other ones that were closed also. Catacombs under the cemeteries are quite common in the area via Appia. The very word catacomb derives from the Latin expression catacumbas, to the caves. So these are like, and these look like tombs to me with these shelves in them. I think the Jewish people are Romans, not people from the Middle East. An inscription from the Villa Tortilla Jewish catacomb. The inscription found indicate that there were at least 12 synagogue congregations distinguished by sometimes overlapping factors such as the neighborhood and geographic origin of the congregants. At times, the congregations were even centered around a single profession. From the inscriptions, we learn that Jews had many different occupations, from butchers to medical practitioners. And you see the little menorahs and the shofars and the candles and stuff. And most of them are written in Greek. So why is Rome full of Jewish archaeology? The detailed inscription marks the burial of a 4-year-old Nathan Marosa, containing a menorah, a shofar, a luva, and an etrog. It is interesting to see that all the inscriptions are in Latin or Greek. There's no Hebrew. Why are these symbols in Jewish cemeteries remain a mystery, says one of the scholars, Jessica Della Russo, from the International Catacomb Society. In the Skype conversation with the Times, I can't tell you what these people believed in. She doesn't know what they believed in, but they got menorahs all over everything. Aside from the menorah chamber, there are 3 other chambers that do not bear any significant Jewish sign, says Della Russa. The paintings are interestingly neutral. They feature most genetic kind of Roman sentiment connected to paradise, flowers, birds, goddess of fortune, Tika, and they are symbols which everyone used in that time, and I couldn't tell you what these people believed in. Now, can you believe that? She can't tell you what they believed in with these symbols on there. It's pretty funny to me. Habakkuk 2:11. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. How true this is. Judah and Judas are both the same word in both Hebrew and Greek. Okay, this small rectangular stone closed the tomb of an infant in the Jewish catacombs of Monteverdi, and that's in Italy. The baby who died at the age of just 7 months was called what? Judah or Judas? This represents one of the many cases of the documented use of Semitic names. So there are multiple cases of this happening, transliterated by the Greek characters, by members of the ancient Jewish community of Chazavir. As may be seen also in Hosea, Aster, Sabbaticus, Maria, and so on. The name itself is a first-line formula. Here lies at the end of the inscription are contained in small frames. These are surrounded by the classical repertoire of Jewish liturgical emblems. with stylized representations of 7 branches of candelabra or menorahs, and aphromas for oil, and loofah, the palm branch, and the myrtle and the willow, typical of the feast of Sukkot. Alongside of these are 3 birds and the symbols of uncertain meaning engraved immediately before the name of the deceased. So, what do we have in Zechariah 1:10? So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, "These are whom Yahuwah has sent to patrol the earth." And why do we have graves with all these Jewish symbols on them, and myrtle trees and stuff, and willows? In Italy instead of the Middle East? Here's another one, and this one's very, very interesting because this is in Villanosa, Italy, and it says there's a shofar depicted as an old burial plaque from a Jewish catacomb in Italy, along with other ritual objects once used in Jerusalem temple, including the 7-branched lampstand or the menorah, and the palm branch, and the bundle used for Sukkot on the following of Yom Kippur. The Italian inscription on the plaque states, "Here lies Faiz the Jew," while the Hebrew reads, "Peace." These symbols express relief in the national redemption and the hope for rebuilding the temple. So here's a burial in Italy, and they're hoping for the rebuilding of the temple. And I would question this date. They have it dated to 4th to 5th century CE, but I'm not so sure. I mean, I studied art history and all, and I'm not doing date and carbon and stuff on this stuff, but I'm looking at the dates they have, and to me this looks older than that. It looks a lot like the others from at least the 1st century that we just looked at. This is why I say that. This is a synagogue in Bova Maria, Italy, dated from the 4th century BCE. And what do we see here? We see menorahs on the floor in the mosaics. We see menorahs on the oil candles, and we see Jewish mosaics on the floor. The discovery was made in 1983. The remains of a synagogue complex in Bolivar, Maria, proved a turning point in the research of the Jewish presence in Calabara. It was originally dated between the 4th and 5th centuries AD, but further evidence puts it to the 3rd and 4th century BC. So we're looking at something much older than anything we see in Israel at all. And this is where it's located on Italy, right down here on the tip of the boot of the shoe. Gosh, I hope I don't sound angry, because the more I have looked at this, the more irritated I've gotten because of the lies we got and the stories we've been told. And by the time you watch all 6 videos, you will understand why I'm so irritated, because I have probably at this point 700 slides proving this. I mean, it's just unreal. Okay, this is the actual temple in Pompeii, and it was dedicated to Jupiter or Yahweh or Yehovah, however you want to pronounce it. This is the statue, and this is the pronunciation. Here it is sounded out. If you want to, and you can go look this up. I'm not telling you anything you can't look up online. It's also considered Zeus. Yahweh is hypothetical linguistic reconstruction of the pronunciation, and Yehovah is and it would actually be I-O-V-E in English, because back then there was no J. So most of the stuff had, and the correct Latin form would be Iopater is how it comes out. It comes out, which is combined to form Jupiter. And that's how the Latin is combined. It's IOU, and it's combined with the word father, and it becomes Jupiter. And this actually also could be Jupiter. And this is the actual temple construction. And as you can see from here, from this one in that they saved in Jerusalem, the similarities is uncanny. I mean, it's identical. And they even call this a basilica, part of it. Let's see, that'll be part B right here. This part would be the basilica. This is the main temple with the altar room and all that matching this right here. And this dates to 6th century BC. And here's the statue of Jupiter right here on the left. And this is in Pompeii, Italy. Not Jerusalem, not Israel. That we know what we call Israel today. Okay, here I lined them up side by side. This is the supposed Herod's temple, what it looked like. And here is your Yahweh temple in Pompeii. And this is the temple. Not one supposed in the Middle East, but this is the real temple. Okay, here we have dated, this is 2nd century BC, and you see Neptune with the pitchfork and all the ocean fish stuff. Now what do we see here in the Jewish catacombs? We see the Neptune pitchfork and the menorah in the middle. Neptune was the god of fresh water and sea, the Roman religion. He is the counterpart to the Greek god Poseidon. Neptune was the brother of who? Jupiter / Yahweh and Pluto. And I know this is going to fly in the face of a lot of people. And I just beg you to go back and watch my thing on who your real father is, because we've been told a lot of lies. But you can see this is, 2nd century BC in Italy. And we got the menorahs. Yahweh, aka the Tetragrammaton, aka Yahweh, aka Jehovah, as equipped with the rooster head and the snake legs during the Maccabean period. This is Yahweh during the Maccabean period. That's what they saw him as, 3rd century AD. Here's a gem with it on there. Here's another one. This one's 2nd to 3rd AD. And this was found in the Mediterranean. And there's his name down here at the bottom in Greek. And here I included this. I think I got it in that other one on Who's Your Father, but I included it in case you want to pause and read it and look at it real carefully, because this is literally, what they're worshiping. Okay, here's another one. This one goes all the way back to the 5th and 6th century, and this one is just across the strait here in Sarandé, Sarandé, I think is how you say that. My pronunciation of Latin is not very good, guys. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. But all these ancient, this even looks older to me than 5th or 6th century. I could be wrong, but it looks pretty ancient. Okay, here's another one. This is 1st and 2nd century BC, and this one was found in Turkey, which is not far from Italy. Okay, this is really interesting. This is a 100 AD rare ancient Roman stone seal. And what does it have on it? A menorah. And that was actually their seal with one of the Romans. And here's another one. And this one is an ancient glass Roman jar decorated with a menorah. And it dates way back too. You can see the little menorah. It's kind of hard to see on this one, but you can see the little arms on it if you look careful. And what you're going to find if you go looking for the maps is a lot of remakes to fit a narrative. Because this is literally a medieval remake. And it almost stumped me. I was like, okay, is this actually an ancient old map, or is this a revision and a new remake? And I kind of went and researched it, and it actually is a medieval copy of a 4th century. So you have a lot of remakes running around out there. You have to be real careful what you look at when trying to determine maps. I found that to be really, really, like right in here would be Egypt, and then they've got Mount Sinai right but next to that, and then they've got Jerusalem right here, you know, and this is not on the actual old maps at all. But it looks old, it looks original, and most people would take one glance at it and say, oh, that's old. Yeah, that fits, you know, and go right on and not think a thing about it. Without Father's help, we can't see anything. That's what I've decided. It's like, unless He helps us, we're not going to know the truth. This slide just kind of gives you some timeline that this may have been about this word right here. Let's see. This word right here. That was discovered. Then we have a big clash. And then we have this. I'm not going to read all that off, but it's just something to consider. Look at the dates of when it happened. Now, these people were involved with this. And that makes me suspicious because this word means what? So, just some other things to think about. Okay, we're going to talk about Basilius and Pompeii. Okay, Basilius has a long history. and literary tradition. It was considered a divinity of the genus type at the time of the eruption in 79 AD. It appears under the inscribed name Vasilius as a serpent in the decorative frescoes of many of the Laria, or the household shrines is what that word means, that survived from Pompeii. And an inscription from Capua has it down as Ao Vasilio, which indicates the worship of the power of Jupiter Yahweh. And Jupiter Vasilius actually means unquenchable. Now, the only two eyewitnesses we have of this account are Finney the Younger and Tacitus. But this word plays big into things when you look at prophecy and all. Like in Jeremiah 52:13, it states that Nebuchadnezzar entered the city and all the houses of Jerusalem burned he with fire. The fire was not quenched, but when it went out when the fuel was consumed. Isaiah pronounced doom upon Edom, which is the same word as Rome, saying that the land thereof shall become a burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. The smoke thereof shall go up forever. Okay, and the volcanoes go off like Etna goes off constantly. I just put this back down again, that it means in a sense of unquenchable, because it's really interesting in Matthew 3:12, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge the floor and gather his wheat into the garner, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire, or Vasilius fire. So these words are kind of key into this area also. I think the dispersion was from Italy, Pompeii, which has the oldest Jewish artifacts outside of Sicily, and what we call Israel does not contain what Italy did in the way of ancient artifacts at all. In fact, everything that you find in Israel could have been taken there and is a movable item, most of them in your pocket, some of them in a truck, certainly maybe even a semi, but nothing larger than that. But the proof that this whole area right here is the main area is just overwhelming. And then we have John in 7:35 saying, the Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go, that we will not find him? Does he intend to go among the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? So he would have been a dispersion this way, not from way down here, up there. And we also have Herod was from Idumea. Well, Idumea is the same word as Edom, and it's a word for Rome in Hebrew. Edom was called Mount Seir and Idumea also. 1 Samuel 14:47, so Saul established his sovereignty over Israel and fought against his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobat, and against the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he harassed them. Well, if the Jewish rabbis say Edom is Rome, then how the heck are they down here with Edom? There's just something wrong here. And you can go listen to video after video of rabbis telling you Edom is Rome. They clearly state it. I'm not saying anything out of school that they don't say. And then when you look at the word, here's Edom in Hebrew, and here's Rome in Hebrew. I hope I'm being real clear with this, because this has taken a long time to put this together in a way that I can make somebody else understand what I'm seeing. But this is the primary, okay, these people from here went here, 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 and up in here, and here. And they took the African coast. I don't have this recorded in the 1st century. When I looked at the old maps, all I saw down here was Palestine. None of what we have been told was there is not on the original old maps, not a remake, a reconstructed Middle Age map, or a 4th century or 5th century, but an ancient, really 1st century map has nothing here. I don't expect y'all to take my word for it. You can study this out, and look at it. And actually, Pompeii on the wall has carved in the side of the wall. I'm going to show you that slide in a minute. But it has Sodom and Gomorrah literally carved in the rock wall on it. Okay, and this is Genesis 19:30. And Lot went up out to Zoar, are the insignificant, and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. This is a cave right near there, called the Cave of the Dogs. There's several caves in that area. And that's right between Pompeii and Naples, right in there. Okay, so I looked for this city, and there's a city that sounds identical right there. And there are caves there. It's Tessar. And then right close to there, there's the Grotto of Tiberius. And there's multiple caves up and down all in that area, so he could have been any one of them. But it's weird that that name is mentioned and then the T is silent, and it's almost identical to this word in sound-wise. This is Tiberius's villa with the hot springs in Sperlonga, Italy. And you can see there's just major construction. So was Tiberius if his big hot springs were in Italy, was he in the Middle East, or was he here at his big hot springs? According to Tacitus, he was here and then he was off on his island and right off the coast. He had grottos with numerous sculptures set along the Italian seashore, hot springs, 3 large swimming pools. 1 is inside and 2 outside. And there's a mineral bath pool, and the other had cold water. And this is from Finney the Elder, the Natural History. It says the River Jordanes, and Jordan is also a Latin word. It's an Italian word. Rises from the spring of Peneus, which has given its surname to Caesarea, of which we shall have occasion to speak. This is a delightful stream, and so far the situation locales will allow of winds along and in its course, and lingers and dwellers on its banks. With the greatest reluctance it moves toward the Asphaltes, a lake of gloomy and impious nature, by which it is swallowed up, and it be praised waters are lost sight of the being mingled with the pestilential streams of the lake. For this reason it is that as soon as ever the valleys through which it runs affords its opportunity, it discharges itself into the lake by means of the riders known as Gennesara, 16 miles in its length and 6 wide, and is skirted by peasant towns of Julius and Hippo on the east and Trachea on the south, a name by which many persons give the lake, and of the Tiberias on the west the hot springs, of which are conducive to the restorative health. So it has to be Tiberias's hot springs here in Italy. This is not, Caesarea is not in the Middle East. I mean, it came out right here by Sperlonga, because his hot springs are in Sperlonga, Italy. And one of the old maps, I'm going to try to make sure I include that, has Caesarea right here close by to Sperlonga. And this is Pania della Croce, a mountain in Tuscany, right outside of there. And it's also called Pania. There's just no mistaking that they just moved everything. And then you have the Tyrian seacoast. This is all Tyrian seacoast here. It is on the old maps too. And here's the word Jordan, or Jordan. It means descender. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered, and everywhere before Yahweh destroyed the Sodom and Gomorrah, as the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt or Mitzrayim, as thou comest unto Tesor, that same city. And the region of origin for this word, for Jordan, is Italy. And it's very similar to Judeans in spelling also. And here is the writing on the wall. It's going to be kind of hard to see because of this. I had to make the slide out of that, but this is what it looks like when you see it up close. And it just is an inscription that reads Sodom and Gomorrah. And they say somebody went back and put that in later, but this has been, all this stuff, it's on the wall of the house, number 26. And this stuff has been buried in lava for 2,000 years. So how did somebody go in there and scrawl that on there? You know, in rock. There's something wrong and fishy with their stories. And you'll see this name for Jordan, you see that a bunch too in just in everyday writing. Like there's an inscription found in a 19th century excavation site. I went to see where it was discovered. It was on the shores of Naples, in the center of Isola, a kind of city block, and it was found in a beautifully preserved column atrium. 26 house 26, just like the others in the insula, dark, destroyed, with vestiges of paintings on the wall, but mostly nothing. That's where this is carved. And this was written by who else? Somebody with the same last name as Jordan River. And his book, The Jews in Pompeii, Herculaneum, Strabia, and the cities of Campegia. This is part of the recordings by Finney the Younger. And you'll notice he was born Gaius. Okay, well, Gaius is a Roman word, and John says he's writing to the elder, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. 3 John 1:1. Romans 16:23. Gaius, who is host to me, writes Paul, to the whole church greets you. So they're both talking about this people with these same names, even if it's not the same one, which I think it is. and it's an Italian name. And this is what he writes: Darkness descended at noon, the earth shook with the violent tremors and destroyed homes, and drove back the sea from its banks. People tied pillows to their heads against the storm of stones, and cinders rained from on high. In the distance they saw a cloud of flames, gas, and burning rocks shooting more than 20 kilometers into the sky. It was a very bad day in Pompeii. And he wrote, you might hear the shrieks of women, the screams of the children, and the shouts of men. And said some wished for swift death, some held their hands up to the gods, but the greater part, convinced that they were no gods at all, and that the final endless night had come upon the world. But help came, not from the heavens, but across the seas. The Roman Navy's attempts to rescue the people from one of history's most famous natural disasters is detailed in an exhibition, Escape from Pompeii, The Untold Roman Rescue. And that's located at the Australian National Maritime Museum. So all this is documented. This was also a major seaport, and Finney was actually on a boat when he was dictating all what was happening. And this is the account if you want to read it. But I think this plays into Revelation 18:19, and they threw dust on their heads, and they wept and mourned, crying, Alas, alas, the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been laid waste. I think it was talking about Pompeii. I could be wrong, and you can research that out, but I'm pretty sure. Like I told you, we have two cities. We have Pompeii and we have Herculaneum. And Herculaneum actually means the city of destruction, and we have these frozen in time corpses like this in both cities from Vesalius and Genesis 19:25. So he overthrew those cities and the plain and all the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back from behind, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abram rose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before Yahweh. And he looked at Sodom burning and Amorah's submersion. And there's actually a city that is submerged off of this area also. I need to pull that and put that in here too. Probably do that. And he saw the smoke of the land which went up like the smoke of a furnace. Thus it came to be, when Elohim destroyed the cities of the plain, and Elohim remembered Abraham and sent Lot covering out of the midst to overthrow, and he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. Okay, I went and looked it up and added it so you could see it. This is the city, and Amorah actually means submersion. And this is the city that's submerged right off of that area. And it's really weird because you have the six. This reminds me of the stuff, you know what it is. If you've watched any videos, you'll know that this is not a good symbol. But that's a flooring, and here's one of the statues of a woman in one of the buildings. This is the submersion they found. And I think they found this in like 2018. That's not that long ago. Okay, this is a Jewish kosher shop that they found in Pompeii. The mosaic floor in the home of a man named Annas Umbrilicus Scatterus, I guess is how you say that, I'm not sure. And it depicts a jar of garum ready for sale, and the store owner sold that, and they know that this was evidence because of the writing on it that it was this, and that it was a kosher garum. so indicating that the Jews were actually living in Pompeii back then. Okay, so this is a long time ago, before all their dispersion and stuff. They were already there. This is ancient stuff. Okay, and here's a painting they found in Pompeii. This is a painting of the Judgment of Solomon. It is him deciding on the two women, and it's the mother of the baby that you see in 1 Kings 3:16 through 28. This is one of the earliest known depictions of a biblical scene. This is where the woman's pleading for a baby's life, and a woman kneels at the feet of the King Solomon and relinquishes her claim to the contested child, thus identifying the real mother of the infant. Nearby, a soldier prepares to follow the king's orders to cut the baby in two, while another woman, who also claims to be the mother, stands by, ready to take her half. The Roman wall painting is from the house of a physician in Pompeii. It's the earliest known depiction of the biblical scene known. They were pretty shocked when they found it. And some of this is actually being scrubbed off the internet. I don't know if the algorithms are picking up people picking it up, but this is ancient stuff. It's like, there's no doubt in my mind that this is where everything really happened. And here is, this is one of the complexes in Pompeii, and it's from 6th to 7th century BC. That's how old all this stuff is. And unlike the other towns it has in Campegia, it founded for the most part by the Greeks, they want to say, and the Oscans probably in 9th or 8th century BC. But evidence now, to me, is Jewish, because that's definitely a Jewish star. And that was in the Caso Torriello Lomo in Pompeii, Italy. And it was buried under all the lava and ash, and they uncovered it. Here's another one. This is in the same place in Pompeii, and you can see there are multiple Stars of David in there. And you actually got rows of them intertwined. And there's that symbol thing too, just like on the floor out in the ocean. That shape, the six-sided shape. I hope y'all find this interesting, because it has really, I was totally in shock. I didn't know they had uncovered all this. When I studied art history, none of this was known. This literally could be Solomon's house. I mean, the whole thing is just covered in these things all over the place. I got as many photos as I could for y'all to see this. And there's lilies and the Star of David's, the lily here, and you know how that was part of Solomon too, the lilies in the scriptures. I'm not going to read all of this. Y'all can go through and read it if you want to, but main thing is just to see that this stuff is there. I was totally shocked. There's another one. This is in the entrance in the threshold. There's a whole row of the Star Davids, and then the whole floor is covered in them too. This is in that same house, and it's huge. You can go to these websites I've got here if you want to go look at all the pictures. And here's some more artifacts. This one, I believe, they time it from 1 to 500 AD. That's a pretty big timeline. And here they dated it from 300 to 350. But it's an old glass leaf bowl with menorahs and the scrolls in the middle and the shofars. It's got all the Jewish stuff on it. And this was all Roman. It has even the Torah Ark. Here's a close-up of another one. Um, you don't find this stuff, Um, why is it being found in Italy? There's your lines of Judah even. It's like this is massive. And this one was found in the Roman catacombs. I thought to myself, I said, well, if the Romans were actually the Jews back then they would have to have some similarities in their customs. Well, everything I looked at, I found. Here's one, like in Exodus 21, when you buy an ivory slave, he shall serve 6 years, in the 7th he shall go free for nothing. If he comes in a single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, then she bears him sons or daughters. The wife or her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then the master shall bring him to God, and shall bring him to the door, or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and it shall be his slave forever. Okay, when I looked up the ancient Roman earrings were worn only by the slaves, and in ancient Greece by the prostitutes. So this had to be a Roman thing. Life as a slave in Rome, an empire, the difficult life of living thing, the hope, the cities often owned slaves directly, used them for public works. The master was witnessed before the judge and sealed it by the piercing of an ear. So they did exactly the same thing to their slaves as is in Exodus. The Roman baths. Okay, everywhere you look in Rome, there are baths. Well, Jewish law requires one immersed in a mikveh as part of a process of conversion to Judaism. It also requires women immersed before getting married and when observing the laws of Niddah. There are also various other reasons, both traditions and modern, that women as well as men and Jews who are gender non-conforming visit the mikveh. So most men visit a mikveh every day. Well, almost every Roman house has a mikveh. I mean, there are 952 baths of varying sizes in Rome alone. And ancient, going back 6th century BC, there are still these baths. And according to the Talmud, there have to be enough water to cover the entire body of an average sized man, and most of these are huge. You even have them at Qumran, Hadrian's Wall, and Beresford Fort. There's just numerous bathhouses throughout the whole empire. So apparently the Romans were practicing mikveh. The Roman stola had long side with fringes. Um, they was an ornate tunica hem in the hairdressing fresco of Pompeii, and probably a woman, and the ornate tablet woven edges were made with long side fringes. just like you see in the biblical account. So they had fringes on their tunics. By Flavian in 69 to 90 AD, the stoa no longer represented all decent women married to a Roman citizen. It is solely the garb of 600 senatorial wives, and the wives had abandoned the stoa completely. The frequent literary meaning of stoas ebb away by the beginning of the 2nd century. And this is Livia, the first Roman empress, with her palace stowed aside to display her stoa, which is kept over her head and covered her head and then went down with the long sides. It's pretty interesting. And this one is a picture from Pompeii. Kissing was a Roman thing and is also a Judean thing. In Exodus 4:27, and Yahuwah said to Aaron, "Go to meet Moshe in the wilderness," and he went and met him on the mountain of Elohim and kissed him. Judaism developed the kissing practice as a form of pious behavior to express the dearness of a ritual item. There's a widespread custom in a Jewish household to kiss the mezuzah, the miniature little parchment on the side of the doorpost when you enter a dwelling. And in classic Judaism, sometimes they kiss the hand of the grand rabbi too. And you know, in Luke 22:48, Jesus said to Judas, he said, "Would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" So, and then Peter talks about kissing. And the Romans were the pioneers of introducing the kiss to other parts of the world via military conquest. Roman poets such as Catullus and Ovid celebrated the kiss, and members of the populace were avid mouth-to-mouth practitioners of it. According to the classic Donald Lanier of Ohio Wesleyan University, Roman men even seem to have developed a mouth fixation, which is crazy, expressing very high standards for who was worthy to be kissed. There were also several important laws on kissing, and it's significant as a social custom in that time. The rise of Christianity, the church grew increasingly concerned about kissing. However, Peter referred to the kiss of charity, and Paul wrote, salute one another with a holy kiss. So this was a custom. The priests worried these instructions might encourage carnal sin with an apparent blessing of the church, and some reacted by separating the men and women from their congregations. The Romans were pioneers of introducing the kiss to other parts of the world. So this matches also. Romans and the Judeans both alike had the same wedding sacrifices. And that was interesting too. Roman ritual for weddings compared to the Jews involved the procession by the bride to her new home and the giving of gifts. The reality of transportation for the woman is highlighted by a common Roman phrase referred to as the marriage ducere, exorum, to lead the wife, and the day after the wife is brought to her new home, there was a party in which the bride made sacrifices to the household gods for their new home. And then in Philo and Josephus suggest that the small-scale marriage sacrifices were a part of the Judean practices in the home also. In 133, under Jewish marriage and iniquity, it says that Philo referred to the bridal sacrifices and feast. And Josephus also mentions the sacrifices in Iniquities 4.245. Some have pointed to the passage from Tobit as further evidence of a Judean household wedding sacrifice. Tobit 8, 1-3 recounts the burning of the fish liver to ward off evil spirits. And I believe this passage is best seen as an example of apolotrophic fumigation practice rather than a household sacrifice. A number of factors point away from normal sacrificial practice. The subject is the fish, the liver is burned rather than eaten, and the fish liver is burned not on any altar but on an incense burner. And the text never actually calls it the practice of sacrifice. So that one's debatable, but they both there are mentions all over the place of wedding sacrifices in both cultures. Also, first fruits, giving of first fruits, were both. It's in Leviticus 23:10. When you come into the land which I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. Well, Epictetus was born in 50 A.D., presumably of Hierapolis, Phrygia, and the name of his parents was unknown. In Greek, it simply meant gained or acquired, and the Greek philosopher Plato in his laws used the term to mean property. It was added to one's inheritance. He spent his youth as a slave in Rome to Aphroditos, a wealthy freedman and secretary to Nero. And there's that word freedman. That's seen in the New Testament too. Tiberius Claudius Epaphroditus was a freedman and secretary of the Roman Emperor Nero. He was later executed by Domitian for failing to prevent Nero's suicide. Well, their philosophy, he founded the school of philosophy there, and their view was maintained throughout the Roman period and was known by the writings of Epictetus and Seneca. Epictetus offers no critique of the sacrifice, only concern for correct beliefs about the gods. In piety toward the gods, I would have you know, the chief element is this: to have the right options about them and existing and administering the universe well and justly, and to set yourself to obey, to submit to everything that happens, and to follow voluntarily, in the belief that is the fulfilling of the highest intelligence. But it's always appropriate to make libations and sacrifices and to give of the first fruits after the manner of our fathers, and to do all this with purity and not a sloven or careless fashion. For indeed, and that's kind of a weird word to say on here, might get me binged, so you can just read that way, nor yet beyond your means. And this was written 31, so they both gave of first fruits, a sacrifice. Well, nothing drives all this home like finding Potter's Field in Rome and not in the Middle East. Matthew 27:3. Then when Judas his betrayer saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, What is this to us? See to it yourself. And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, It is not lawful to put them in the treasury, since it is blood money. So they took counsel and brought them with them, and bought them with them the Potter's Field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore that field has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Okay, when you look and read about Rome, It says in Rome, the potter's field was on the side of the hill, according to the website on ancient Rome. A large pit graves contained the friendless poor, the plague-inflicted bodies and the dead animals, the roadkills, the abandoned slaves, the arena victims, the criminal outcasts, and the unidentified bodies. The stench became unbearable, and the sight became a source of disease. The Emperor Caesar Augustus designated a new potter's field and buried the original one under 25 feet of soil. He renamed it Horta Macentius, the Garden of Machias, and it's right there in the Splack in Rome, not in the Middle East. So we have Potter's Field, that they bought was in Rome, not in the Middle East. That's it right here. You can see I put a circle around it. And the Potter's Field was located in the eastern part of Esquine Hill, and there were grave pits for the friendless, the poor, the plague-infected, dead animals, filth, scraps, and scrappings of the road, abandoned slaves, arena victims, criminal outcasts, and unidentifiable dead. And this is it right here. Somebody had circled that on this map that I found it on, but it's right there. And that just explains the same thing that I just read on the other page. But I thought you'd want to see it blown up because you can actually see the words on there. And see, here is Mount Palestine right there. It's just unreal. And if you go look at a lot of these old maps, you'll see a lot of names on there that you recognize when you just peruse through them and look at them. Here's another picture. Here's another map I found, another ancient one. And you see there's the Baths of Agrippa, Arch Tiberius. You'll find all kinds of things on here that you will recognize. The Palace of Augustus, right there. The Baths of Domitian. If I took all this and moved it, you could see all of it, but you'll see names on there that you know. The Portico of Philip, right there. Agrippa's Bridge, names you all know. I think it all happened here, not some other place. Right now you're probably asking yourself, what do I believe in and what is going on? And you're probably really scared and confused and worried, and you don't need to be. If you find in this video, you found it because Father wanted you to find it, and because Father loves you, and He sent His Son, and He told the truth. And that truth will set you free from a major pagan mess. A lie. A huge lie. So don't be afraid of it. And don't doubt. If anything, this should confirm that Father's real and that He loves you. And that they worship what they don't know. And they have been. And they will continue to deceive. And our job is to help others see the truth so that they don't fall in the same pitfall. I'm going to talk a little bit here about this one because it's kind of interesting. When Wikipedia shows Yahweh or Yehovah, he says it's the king of the gods, and he's the god of sky and lightning, And you know, all the time in the Old Testament, he appears with lightning. And it says he's a member of the capital triads. And you know, that word right there is also a playing part of it all. And it says that he was venerated by the imperial cult of ancient Rome, which means, yes, the Romans worshipped Yahweh. And that's what his name is pronounced at. One of his signs is the eagle. He'll bear you up on eagle's wings. I'm sorry, I can't talk today for some reason. And he carries a rod. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort thee. He sits enthroned among the gods. Yes, he does. He sits enthroned among the gods in Rome, not in the Middle East. His name can literally mean Jew Peter or Jew Father, Father Sky. It can mean any one of those things. I think Peter and them set it up to take you back to this deity, and this was not who our Savior, revealed to us. And I can't emphasize enough, if you have not watched my video on who is your real father, you need to go watch it. And it's going to be a difficult one to understand too, but you can. And you don't have to take my word for all this. You can go study all this out. It's right there. You can find it real easy. Like, right here is Capri, where Tiberius, where he stayed in his palace for so long, on that island off the edge of Italy. And it was called the Villa of Yahweh, or Jupiter. And it was built in 27 A.D. That was the same time that Jesus was still walking the earth. And he stayed there till his death in 37 A.D. But you can read all this and you can study it out, and you can know that Father loves you, and he's just showing you the truth. And he's pulling you out. It's like, come out of him, my people. That's what he meant. You're in the wrong thing. They attached this book and their God to something that didn't belong. Here we see them in different various things. This is the one in Rome. Okay, and then here we have the Christian versions. They're all just alike. And just to compare, even the hand gestures and everything, there's the rod, the lightning rod. And here we see the heifer. This is a relief of Marco Aurelius sacrificing to Yahweh from the Declaration of the Arch of the Triumph. And in Numbers 19:2, the law of the Torah, which Yahweh had commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they may bring you a red heifer, a perfect one, and there is no blemish, on which a yoke has ever come. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and he shall bring it outside the camp, and they shall slay it before him. There's your picture. And Exodus 15:11, who is like you, O Yahweh, among the mighty ones, the gods? Who is like you, great in set apartness, awesome in praises? There is none like you among the mighty ones, the gods. O Yahweh, you are like your works, and there are none. And there he is, sits enthroned among the gods at the top. And this is the rendering of the temple of the tetrastyle. It's a 4-column across, and it represents the size in the Corinth order. The impediment features Jupiter, Yahweh, enthroned in the center, while flanked with other deities as intricately sculpted chorus surrounded by an apex in a trigeminal four-horse chariot. The frames of the scene, okay? The four-horse chariot, the four horses of the apocalypse, ring a bell? And there's your eagle. He'll bear you up on eagle's wings, and he's holding his rod. This is their deity. And your so-called chosen ones today are from Italy. Here we go. Here saw the rod and the staff. Psalm 23:4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll feel no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Isaiah 9:4. For thou hast broken the yoke of the burden, the staff of his shoulder, the rod of the oppressor, as in the day of Midian. Isaiah 10:5. O Assyrian, the rod of thy anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. Isaiah 10:24. Therefore thus says Yahuwah Elohim of hosts, O my people, thou dwellest in Zion, be not afraid of the Assyrian. He will smite thee with thy rod, and shall lift up thy staff against thee, after the manner of the double straits, or the Mitzrayim. That word is not actually Egypt. Egypto was the actual word for Egypt in ancient times. And this is a painting on the wall from Pompeii with the eagle, the globe, the rod, and the staff. And that's Yahweh Jupiter. Isaiah 28:27. For the finches are not threshed with the threshing instrument, neither is the cartwheel turned upon the cumin, but the finches are beaten with the staff, and the cumin with the rod. The staff and the rod. Jeremiah 48:17. All ye that are about him, be among him, and all that you know his name, how his strong staff is broken and his beautiful rod. There you have it. Mention about these fish and menorah and all that stuff, okay? A lot of the people, like from Caesar's Messiah and everything, are trying to tell you that the Romans created Christianity to get you sucked in and all this stuff. Don't believe that stuff. It's like the Jews had the menorahs and the fishes long before. These things are ancient. This stuff goes way back to 2nd century BC. That was a Jewish thing. It was not a Christian thing. So just don't be sucked in by that stuff. I wanted to show this one more time. Here's another one. This is all Jewish stuff. It's not Christian. It's too old to be Christian. Okay, Capitol Hill, where Yahweh was worshipped in Rome. Okay, Alexander the Great, as the sun god Helios, the Roman bust of Alexander the Great was actually in that area. Alexander demanded that his statue be placed in the temple, and but the high priest explained to him that this was impossible, promising him instead that all his sons born a priest in that year would be named Alexander, and that the Sadducean era would be introduced. This story appears identical where the Sadducee is mentioned in the Sotah. During the administration of Simon the Just, the red heifer is said to have been burned twice, and he therefore put 2 wooden bridges over the temple mound to the Mount of Olives. I don't know if I included those bridges in this presentation. If I didn't, I'll put them in the next one. But there were 2 bridges going into Rome, and then from the Temple Mound of the Mount of Olives, well, right outside of Rome, is a big mountain covered with olive vineyards. None of this happened in the Middle East. This is all happened in Rome and Italy. This is a detail of the Alexander mosaic representing Alexander the Great and his horse Bucephalus found in Pompeii. And that's an actual wall piece. You can see how pieces of it are missing. And this one is from 356 to 323 BC, the king of Macedonia. And it's a statue of Alexander on the same horse. And it's from 1st century, and this was also found in Pompeii. And when Alexander the Great marched through the Palestine in the year of 33, Simon the Just, according to the legend, dressed in 8 priestly robes, went to the Kfar Saba to meet him, although Josephus states that Alexander himself came to Jerusalem. So we've got 2 accounts. We've got one saying he came to Rome, and the other saying that he came to the Middle East, because I believe they just don't understand where these things really happened. Okay, the Fascius Judicaeus was a Jewish tax that was imposed on the Jews in the Roman Empire. After the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, revenues were directed to the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus in Rome. Well, they were directed to the temple of Yahweh. They were specifically a Jewish tax placed on them. They were to support the cult of Yahweh. Optimus Maximus on the capital served to commemorate the Flavian victory in Judea. So why is that called in Judea? Just as effectively, the monuments were erected in Rome that recalled this event. And it's like there's just too many parallels. And the Emperor Domitian was suspected the Jewish implication historically being anti-Jewish, I think, is incorrect, since the funds went to Yahweh, pronounced Yehovah, pronounced Yahweh. This was the deity of the Jews. It was a literal deity. It's crazy. And now I want to talk about this Arch of Titus that dates from 1st century and was erected by Domitian in 81 AD. It's interesting, the Jewish wars, Flavian omits any mention of the Roman soldiers in a procession returning to Rome. There's nothing mentioned about that, as if the Rome wanted to hide the number of men and resources and required to defeat. No mention of the victory on it, and there's also why are all the Christians killed in Rome, not in the Middle East? Why were they killed in Rome? The dedication inscription of the Arch of Titus in Rome, the Senate and the Roman people to the divine Titus and the divine Vespasius Augustus. Okay, and you know it says in the Old Testament, and is it not written in your law, ye are gods? Because all of them were mentioned as divine. That's why, because they were in the Jewish, they thought they were divine. Now let's take a real hard look at this thing. Okay, the Arch of Titus, the Summa Sacra Via, the highest point of the Sacra Via, Roman Sacred Way is what that means. This was the main avenue to the temple. This is not a war procession. Do you see anybody dressed? Let's see. Let's look at this guy. He's got a helmet and shield and knife and armor. These are priests. That's not a war procession. There's no military dress, no weapons. This is a spiritual parade. It's a big hoax. They were carrying their own menorah because they had menorahs all over the place long before Jerusalem was destroyed or supposedly destroyed in the Middle East. And it's like we talk about Aleppo. You have things dating back that are talking about Aleppo in regard to the Holy Land. Do you realize all the Aleppo are trees and they're in Sicily, along with all these ancient artifacts dating back from 13th to the 7th century BC? This is the Pina del Aleppo National Reserve. So what do we think Aleppo is way over in the Middle East for? It's everywhere I looked, everywhere I've turned, it's just fallen into place. I mean, it's not really hard because when I showed you the last video, this is Mount Edna, that's Yahweh's mountain, and this is Mount Ibi, you know, and your Aleppo forest is right in here. It's like, and these are a necropolis. That's crazy. Here's how crazy it is now. Okay, in this writing from Strabo that was written way back, it says the western extremities of Judea toward the Caucasus are occupied by the Idumeans, which is the Edomites, and by Lake Sorbesus. The Idumeans are Nabateans. Okay, there was a whole bunch of Nabateans that lived right down in here. And that's well documented, and there were plenty of them there. When driven from their country by sedition, they passed over to the Jews and adopted their customs. The greater part of the country along the coast to Jerusalem is occupied by Lake Sorbesus. And I'm not sure if they're considering these lakes, because I know in some of the Roman writings they consider the Mediterranean lakes or not. I have not found that lake yet. And by the track of contingent for Jerusalem is near the sea, which we have said may be seen from the arsenal of Joppa. Okay, well, there was no J. This is Iapa Vineyards up here, which it says lies to the north, which is to the north. They are inhabited generally, with each place in particular, by mixed tribes of Egyptians, Arabs, and Phoenicians. Of this description are called the inhabitants of Galilee, and this whole area right here on the ancient maps is listed as Galilee. And the plain of Jericho, and Jericho means Moon City. There are two possibilities for Moon City: Begonia, which is also known as Moon City, and then there's another city right here known as Luna, which means moon. And I tend to think it's this city right here because in the scriptures is mentioned palm trees, and there are tons of palm trees in the city of Luna. And there's also a very, 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 very ancient round circular structure I'm going to show you in the next video that's in Luna. And then it says, of these territories, there's Philadelphia. Well, there's still a Philadelphia down here in southern Italy. And then it talks about Samaria. Well, Samaria is Santa Maria. Samaria is English for Santa Maria. And surnamed Sebasti by Herod. And Herod was from Rome because it says he was from an Idumean. I mean, and then he goes on to say, Strabo goes on to say that the Egyptians were the ancestors of the present Jews. So apparently he thought the Egyptians, and I don't have a ancient copy to see if that's Mitzrayim or if it's Egypto, because that may be mistranslated, so I'm not sure. So he may be talking of this same area anyway, but I just don't have the ancient translation to look at it. Okay, this is interesting too. Tacitus in 1554 in the Complete Works of Tacitus. Okay, he said, it was, however, wonderful how among the people at different class, rank, age, and sex, and among the rich and poor, even was kept in secrecy till the betrayal began, and the house of the Scaevinus, and that's a lot like Scevas, the day before the treacherous attempt, after a long conversation with Antonius Attalus, Scaevius returned home, sealed his will, and drawing upon the sheath of the dagger, and of which I have already spoken, and complaining that it was blunted from long disuse, he ordered it to be sharpened on a stone to be kept to a keen point. This task he assigned to his freeman Milcalus. At the same time sat down to be more than an unusual scrupulous banquet, and gave his favorite slaves their freedom, and money to the others. He himself, depressed eventually in a profound thought he affected gaiety in desultory conversation. Boy, this is hard to read. I guess I'm tired of reading. Last of all, he directed ligatures for wounds and means of staunching blood to be prepared for the same Malichus, who either knew of the conspiracy or of the faithful up to the point that was complete ignorance, and then caught suspicions, as most authors have inferred. For when the servile imagination dwelt on the rewards of the perfidy, and he saw before him the same moment boundless wealth and power, conscience and care of patrian life, together with the resemblance of the freedom he had received, fled from him. Now we find out that Flavius Scaevius is a Praetorian tribune and quaestor, and he was a member of the Piscine conspiracy against Nero. It was thought his freedman Milicus that Nero discovered the conspiracy, after the history is silent on the fate of Flavius, and some sources say he was a consort with Otho and exiled by Vitellius. A freedman or a freedwoman is formerly an enslaved person who has been released from slavery in the Roman history. Now we have Simon Peter in John 18:9-11, and this was to fulfill the word he had spoken of those whom you gave me, I have not lost one. Then Simon Peter, having the sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. The servant's name was Malchus. It's probably the same person. And so Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? And Malchus is a servant of the Jewish high priest Cleopas, who participated in the arrest of Jesus, written in the four Gospels according to the Bible. One of the disciples, Simon Peter, being armed with a sword, cut off the servant's ear in an attempt to prevent the arrest of Jesus. Then we learn in Acts 6:9, then some of those who belonged to the synagogue of the freedmen, this is the same group, and the Cretans, and of the Alexandrians, and those from I think this is Sicily, and Asia, rose up and disputed with Stephen. But you're talking about the same the same system, the same people, freedmen's, and probably the same servant. It's so similarly spelled because the Latin is a little different than the Greek. Okay, this is what I was talking about. The imperial cult that worshipped Yahweh in Rome. These believed to be mortal manifestations of the divine and were worshipped as gods. Some of the emperors made worship of themselves mandatory. Okay, now we have in John 10:34, Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law, I said ye are gods? If ye called them gods to whom the word of God came, and scripture cannot be broken. And do you say, by whom the Father consecrated and sent into the world? You are blaspheming, because I said, I am the Son of God." Okay? And then in Psalms 82:6 is where he's quoting, "I said, ye are gods, Son of the Most High, all of you." And these men were regarded like gods. And that's what the Judeans believed also. And that's what's written in the Old Testament. This is some pictures for you just to consider. We'll just pause on each one. You can stop it and look at them carefully if you want to. But I was an artist for many, many years. And this is just really hard to miss. I mean, it's just so uncanny. They sure are a lot alike. All these are Roman busts, and these are current chosen ones. There you have it. Over and over. And another one. And another one. And another one. And one more. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you learned from it. Most of all, don't walk away from your faith. Just know that those mountains finally moved for you. Your faith finally came through, and you can realize that what he told you was true. And you can follow it, and you can understand it. It's just, you got to have Father's help. You have to pray to Father. And he said he returned to our God and his God and our Father and his Father. And we have to believe that because it's the only true thing we have. I love you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it.